welcome to the first episode of Disliking Cat. I'm your host, I Don't Know Like Mom. Today our guest is Ransomware, an indie artist currently operating on both SoundCloud and YouTube. He is the creator of the genre techno-babble rap, strong advocate for cybersecurity, personal privacy, and information studies. His song, Attack, was the first rap song that chose to address the problem of ransomware, breaking new ground for the genre. He's now working on his new song. What's your new song again?
I think it's going to be called Bobathan.
Bobathan. And he's also aiming for mainstream record label, is that correct?
Yeah.
How are you today, Ransomware?
I'm quite good. You know, I had a good meal before this. I had some chicken tendies. You know, pretty good. You know, the weather's not too bad, so drive over here is nice. You know, all in all, not a bad time.
Yeah, it's really jolly to hear that. Is that okay for me to just call you like Mr. Somewhere, just somewhere, to save us both time? Yeah, alright. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Somewhere.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. You know, it's actually my first podcast I've ever been on. So you kind of you took my podcast virginity, as it were.
How humorous of you. Now, first and foremost, alright, most audience might not know your work. Your song Attack specifically focuses on the problem of cybersecurity, more specifically, ransomware. I just want to play a clip for the audience so that they can keep up with us to know what's happening. Here's a clip from the song Attack by Ransomware.
$500.
Ransomware's annoying. It encrypts your files and demands some Bitcoin, but it got me inspired to rap for a while because it's getting kind of wild that the shit just been doing lately hasn't been well. If this data, your data, make you wanna cry next time, back up your shit. I don't have to say why, but your encrypted file might just age like fine way. Just wait, decryption key might be posted online. At least that's what happened with Petcha, but I might betcha there's already modified copies that could get ya. Sit still, listen up, I'll give you all a lecture about why they use ransomware to infect ya. Once this has been known, we can start to unfold, solve the puzzle as to dethrone. My theory is threefold. Here's why hackers use ransomware to achieve goals. It's easy and preventable, and it makes your PC inhospitable. They got the greasy hands on your data is despicable, might even be invisible, might even cause problems, try to cripple you. I really want to solve them, but it's difficult. The locks are gone on, I'm despicable. I got some sad news for the victim, no key or a backup, it would miserable. Might even try and break the machine, getting physical.
Wow, so powerful, isn't it? Would you mind go deep into this piece of work? The first piece of work of yours. It's like a magnum opus, I would suppose.
I guess you could say that.
And what's the story behind it, right? Is there any like background? What's your inspiration? And forgive me for being blunt right here. But why do you think this work is anything of significance? Like, what is the value of this work?
Okay, well, you know, it all kind of started when I wanted to help my relatives, I wanted to help my friends. You know, I see them get in trouble with all these ransomwares going around. You know, one day they're doing fine. You know, the next day they're in tears because their important game files are encrypted, and they just can't play their games.
Oof.
It's just ransomware is such a prevalent problem in today's world because as a society we kind of rely on our data to keep us going, keep us doing things on a day-to-day basis. And when all this data is encrypted, it kind of becomes impossible to get anything done. So I do think ransomware is a very large problem, and I wanted through this song to help people kind of understand what is ransomware, why it's such a problem, how one copes with ransomware or deals with a ransomware attack, and also more importantly how it kind of affects people in the ways that you don't normally think about, and how you can use that to their disadvantage. Personally, I think my song goes above most other ransomware songs that I've heard. Before this, I was kind of scoping out the area. I didn't really know what else was out there in the genre of techno babble rap. I was just kind of
a Wild West, let's just say that.
It really is. There's anything from text to speech kind of rap over a royalty free beat, or I heard some other guy rapping about ransomware, and it's very inconsistent. So I wanted to just make kind of an ideological piece, or something that I think would kind of push the boundaries of that specific genre.
Genre pushing. It's really breaking, really forward thinking.
Thank you.
Of a artist mindset. That is inspiring, I must say. But Attack, it's a great song, but it's bygone product. You had done the song. Right now, we need to look for it, isn't it? Do you have like a future project that you don't mind to give out?
Right now, I'm trying to work on my my beat for my song Bobothin. Scheduled to come out. I really don't know when it's going to come out. I've been quite busy lately. I'll try and set aside some time to work on it. But it's basically a stark shift from what I've been doing, which is cybersecurity and online privacy and technology and all that. I felt the need to take a small break from that world. You really got to step out of your comfort zone as an artist every once in a while. And I think by making a song about my cat, or my housemate's cat, Bob, I think it'll really help me to take the next step in my rap career.
Okay, now some people, right? This is just some points out there. I'm not standing behind anything, but some people do have the worry that if an artist steer too far away from their their main focus per se, judging by your name Ransomware, it's a clever name. I'll give you that. Judging by your name Ransomware, you are kind of focused on technobabble, the more sophisticated, more technological sense of the rap scene. Now you start rapping about cats. Like, if there's a backlash coming from your audience, like, do you think you have like anything to say, or like, do you have anything to address this problem?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm gonna stray too far away from technobabble rap for too long. It's always kind of my field that I'm interested in. So I don't think I would ever completely ditch the genre. I just think Bobothin is a way for me to collect my thoughts, spend some time thinking about what is the next most important thing we need to talk about, rather than just try and push whatever I came up with in past. Because I think with these songs, it's important not to just talk about issues that have already been talked about, but to kind of spread information and kind of educate people about what's going on in today's world, rather than what we've seen happen before.
That is a really powerful message. It is a really powerful message. I really do hope that more artists out there will be able to walk out of their comfort zone, basically, like you just said. A lot of artists just really like to settle with the topic that they're comfortable with,
that's true. I see
they're
that.
focused with. So for you to to pull on this risky step of making the second song of your career completely just derail from it's really, I wouldn't call it smart business move, but it's really brave. It's really brave of an artistic statement.
And I would say that I don't know if this will happen, or I could just be completely thinking through this incorrectly, but I would have some hope that by making a song that's not in the technobabble rap genre, I might draw in some more people, have them become more curious about cybersecurity and whatnot.
And then it's also a valid point. Girls and little kids nowadays like to watch cat videos, I presume. So a song about a cat could draw in more audience.
Might try and educate the youth.
Yeah, and try to tell them more about cybersecurity, which comes to cybersecurity, of course. We can all agree that this is your main field. Me as a literature student, I'm not really familiar with the techno sense. Elon Musk is basically the only guy that I know that's off that area. I'm not really a nerd when it comes to like technological stuff. So now that your name and your first song all dedicated to one specific topic, cybersecurity, I will presume that you have lots and lots of insight of this field that you can share with the audience and me specifically, because I'm not really familiar with that field of things, of course. What shall we do when our cybersecurity is threatened? Or better yet, let's define the term of cybersecurity in your sense.
Well, me personally, I think there's a term called information security, which I'm not completely sure if it's synonymous with cybersecurity, but I think the two really go hand in hand. And information security is basically, it's based off of three principles, considered the CIA of information security, and that's confidentiality, authentication, and integrity. And confidentiality is basically, you don't want other people who shouldn't have access to your data having access to your data, so that that shouldn't happen. Because
that makes sense. I wouldn't want my email to be
exactly
seen by other
so
people.
you want to have some confidentiality. Now, availability, which is actually, I just remembered, is just not authentication, it's availability, basically means that you want your data to be available to you when you need it. So you wouldn't want your hard drive fail, and if your hard drive fails and you don't have any backup, that's a flaw with the availability of the data. So you wouldn't want that to happen. The third one, integrity, is basically you want to know when your data has been tampered with or changed. You wouldn't want to send your friend a file and then somewhere along the line it gets messed with, or it gets tampered with. Exactly. Tampered. So you want to be able to know when files have changed or when your data has been tampered with. So those are the basic 3 principles of information security, and I think a lot of other things that we kind of do to stay secure are based off of those 3 principles. Like, if you think about it, our online accounts, we have integrity because we trust in these say social media accounts or banking accounts that they're not going to tamper with our accounts. We trust in these sites like Twitter or Facebook that they're not going to change our messages. And actually, somewhat recently, this was put into question on Reddit when there was a lot of alt-right activity on Reddit, and the CEO, I believe, of Reddit actually went through and changed or tampered with people's messages that they had posted, basically changing what they had said on one of the subreddits when they were talking poorly about him, the CEO. So that really put into light the whole question of integrity online. And as far as availability and confidentiality, many social media websites, they give you an option to have a private account where others can't see as much that's going on your account. Can also privately message users, which adheres to the like idea that you would want your messages to be confidential. Exactly. Thank you. And availability. We would be shocked if say Facebook or Google just went offline. It's kind of unheard of these days, and that's because they have good availability practices. You can kind of always assume that Google or Facebook or these large companies are always going to be there. So a lot of cybersecurity practices are based off of those 3 things.
So now that you have basically you define cybersecurity, right? So, what circumstance would you consider our cybersecurity being threatened?
I would say each individual person is going to have their own answer for that, because we all consider something. We all consider different data to be ours, or to be private. We all want different things to be secure. So, let's say for me, if someone were to have my true phone number, I would consider that a breach of security, because I don't give that out to people, and that would mean either one, that there was a breach in confidentiality, or there was a breach in integrity somewhere and my phone number was leaked. So some other people might not care as much about their someone having their phone number, but they might have other things that they would want to protect, and it's the protection of this online data or just information in general that I would consider to be a breach of privacy if it were to get out or be exposed in a way.
Would you say, let's say my grandma, right? One of the it's 80 years old by now. My grandma would definitely not have any online activity per se. by God, she wouldn't be able to even turn on the laptop, let alone using it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that old people like that completely absent from online, do you think they still need to worry about their cybersecurity or their personal, information?
I do think so, because it even more of a problem is if you have an online presence and suddenly you stop using it less because you're getting older, you have less time to use it, or your other things are taking up more of your time, you're more occupied, then it leaves more of an opportunity for attackers to kind of go in and take over your online presence, which I can't imagine anyone would want that to happen. So, if you're not staying current, maybe there's a new breach that comes out and your password's leaked. If you're using the internet frequently, you might notice these things. Whereas if you're kind of turning a blind eye to the internet as a whole, maybe an old password that you used on a website is being used against you, and you might not realize it.
That's great. That's great. I don't think it's controversial for me to state that you are a man that all about personal privacy.
Mm-hmm.
Cybersecurity is basically security of our information, and personal privacy. I do think that you will hold it quite high of a regard. As the listener may not know, it is to Mr. Ransomware's request that we do not disclose his location nor his real name. You are the most avid supporter for privacy of our personal information for people that I know. I've never seen anyone who go out that of extent to stress the importance of personal information. We all want our privacy, but not much people actually stand up to do something about it. Just what do you have that you want to share with us about, just general people's practice of life, that social media, going on, hang out with people? What kind of some nuance that you have for people's lifestyle surrounding the cybersecurity and everything private?
Well, I think we should all. I think we all deserve to have a certain level of privacy. Even when going about our normal day. Like nowadays, there's so many people that don't really consider their privacy as something to be thought about throughout the day. They just
exactly. They just live their life.
Just go about their day doing normal things and don't really think about it. And I think on a subconscious level, when you don't think about it, it kind of affects you more negatively, because you kind of notice the effects of it, but you don't really understand why you might feel some way or another. Like if you were to get a letter from someone you didn't know addressing you with some personal details, you would feel uncomfortable. It might be a breach of privacy, but you wouldn't necessarily know, well, how did they get this information? And it's by considering day-to-day privacy as we go about answering questions or filling out different things, or maybe Googling stuff, that we don't really think about where we're giving out this information. So when it comes back to us, we might be a little shocked. But the thing to think about is that when and there's been studies that show this, when a civilization or a group of people is surveilled, with or without their knowledge, if there's the idea that they have that they're being surveilled, they will act in a more socially accepted way, or they'll feel more socially pressured to kind of conform to what society wants them. So there's less. It becomes this argument of does surveillance impede people's like personal their personal ideas and their personal ways. Because if you would imagine, even some people that are arguing to get their more rights, and rightfully so, because they haven't had as much rights, and all these kinds of discriminated people, if they didn't have privacy to kind of coordinate or sort of plan these things, then people wouldn't have gotten as far, because the vast majority of people who were uninformed might have stopped these people. So it kind of by having this omnipresent surveillance kind of doesn't allow for people to feel comfortable being who they are in some cases.
Yeah, of course, that makes a lot of sense. We all want some privacy of ourselves. We all want to keep our little secrets, either from even for friends, even between friends, we wouldn't want each other to know everything about anyone, let alone the government, right? But here's another argument. In November 2015, Paris was under the attack of ISIS. As you may know, the terrorist attack that took place in November 13 in Paris, France, and the city of northern suburb, Saint Denis. Beginning at 9 o'clock in the evening, I will believe so, that 3 suicide bombers strike outside of Stade Dent, France, wherever that is, during a football match. After that really, just really shocking event, that it's almost put a country at stake. A lot of American citizens argues that if surveillance actually brings security to both the denizens and the country itself, then why not? So here's my question: what if? And I'm saying what if because I don't actually know. What if surveillance actually brings security? What would be the trade-off? Would you think that would be worth it, or do you think that that's just too much?
Well, I certainly think that's a very relevant topic, especially today, as I don't know if you've heard this, but there's a new act called the Earn It Act, which basically allows the government to pressure companies more to kind of to conform or make it more accessible for governments the data that they have on their users. And a lot of people are arguing that this will stop private companies from using encryption, which is this type of security that's been in the news a lot lately, which basically makes files or messages so secure that the government can't access them. And there's a lot of this relevant debate of a lot of people who are using this aren't good people. We have pedophiles, terrorists, all kinds of these
horrible
people
horrible.
That you wouldn't want to have access to this, having access to this. And a lot of the debate has been around, would it be more beneficial to just get rid of the whole thing, maybe build a government backdoor? A lot of people are talking about what's called client-side scanning. Maybe before, the things are encrypted, they're scanned to make sure that they don't have any of this malicious data or hurtful data on people. And personally, I think it's more valuable to have encryption and to deal with by use of normal investigative techniques these people that these kind of unsavory characters that are using the technology. Because if you think about it, you can't really single out one person when you're using a tactic such as this. There's no mathematical way to break encryption without breaking it for everyone. And once you've broken it for everyone, it kind of defeats the purpose of having it. I mean, there's so many things today that require encryption, such as your normal internet browsing. If you log in to a website with HTTPS, so you get the little padlock icon. You can do that from most places with reasonable security. That your account details, your password, your financial information is secure. It has encryption, and a lot of messengers or some email providers rely on this to make sure that the recipient is getting exactly what the sender sent, and no one along the way is able to view that or tamper with that. And if the government were to start forcing these companies to either disable encryption or build some kind of government backdoor, there's not really any way we could know if any malicious state actors or other unsavory characters find a way to also view these people's messages. And then in that case, we just have the Wild West where everyone has access to everyone else's data, which is not really a good thing. It's not
the most ideal.
Yeah, not what I would imagine the government would have set out to do, but it's always possible when you have these kind of backdoors and systems.
That is a valid concern, I must say. That is a valid concern. You know, I never thought of it before. Like, I'm not really like a privacy guy. You know, I do want my life to remain private, but I haven't like gone through the trouble to learn all these, you know, backgrounds. So thank you for sharing all this knowledge. Now, besides like national threat, which it is real, of course. Besides the national threat, there's also like, you know, just personal risk. In 2017, May, and ransomware that's pretty, you know, it's pretty famous, came out, WannaCry. By exploiting the Eternal Blue from NSA, I believe. Again, I'm not the expert. Correctly,
that's correct.
Thank you. I really hope so. Or else my research just completely useless at this point. The so-called virus use AES-128. Do you have any idea what that is?
Yeah. That would be the advanced encryption standard.
Yeah, right. They encrypted people's, you know, their files and everything, and blackmail them for Bitcoin. Now, WannaCry, it's not a national threat per se, but it does threaten a lot of our, you know, citizens' personal space and personal privacy.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Like, what should we, like, do we have anything to do that we can like somehow protect us or prevent?
No,
something?
definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of measures that people could have taken to, you know, protect themselves from WannaCry and just viruses in general. But if we're talking about WannaCry specifically, you know, a lot of the problem with WannaCry was that we had, so the NSA had Eternal Blue, which was the exploit that gave the NSA full access to, you know, unpatched Windows computers. And this was stolen by the shadow brokers, who then started selling it to independent actors to use for malicious purposes or whatever, you know, whoever was paying for it wanted to do. And eventually, they, you know, I guess they weren't making enough money off of it, or something happened, and they released it for the public, which the people who were making WannaCry must have been so happy when they found that there's now a way for them to spread the virus, or have the virus spread itself, really, without them having to do much work. And the main problem, or the main reason why it spread so fast, was a lot of people didn't have upgraded systems. The exploit that made WannaCry so powerful had actually been fixed in the latest versions of Windows running at the time. But there's so many people and so many companies or corporations that hadn't bothered to update their systems that when WannaCry came knocking at their door, they kind of, you know, they didn't have the defenses to protect against it. Now, we can do our best by protecting ourselves against it by, you know, updating our systems and, you know, keeping firewalls and antivirus and whatnot, and constantly scanning our files and, you know, making sure that we're following proper, you know, internet practices to stay safe. But it's also just a good practice to frequently back up important data. You know, you never know. It doesn't have to be ransomware specifically. You know, maybe your hard drive just fails and then you don't have access to your files anymore, or your computer just stops working one day. It's always important to have the most important files backed up on some separate hard drive, or maybe even in multiple locations if it's something truly important. And if more people had either personal backups or updated software, it wouldn't have been as much of a problem. Now, for large companies, it becomes a different question, because personal people, you know, a lot of people don't want to update their systems just out of laziness, or maybe they don't have time to update it. You know, they gotta go about their normal day, and they don't really think about why their computer needs to be updated. But for large corporations, it becomes a much bigger problem, because they have maybe sensitive customer data that they don't want to lose, or they have their whole, you know, website running on a single server, and once it's encrypted, you know, they can't really conduct normal day-to-day business without their data. So it becomes this issue of how much they want to spend on patching their systems and getting upgraded and staying current with cybersecurity, because they have to pay people to update the systems and install patches and whatnot. And also there's different software that only runs on there's different software that only runs on older versions of Windows or older versions of different servers. And when you have this forced kind of
conflict, it's like
you can't update when you have an old software that you need to conduct business. So through all these things, it causes many companies a dilemma when they're either protecting their cybersecurity or losing money in the short run to keep their software.
it is quite a predicament at that point, isn't it? Speaking of large corporation, when it comes to security, the government's not all that is. Large corporations such as Google, Facebook, those Instagram, etc. Those are basically monopolize our online presence at this point. Where else can you go to watch video besides YouTube, right?
Yeah,
and YouTube is just owned by Google.
That's quite fair.
Yeah. So, do you think they when I say they, those big corporations, Google, Facebook, do you think they had done a good job of protecting the citizens' privacy, or do you think they have, they need to better themselves as a?
Well, I certainly think these big companies, I mean, only to a certain extent, have done their best to try and increase their levels of cybersecurity. I mean, when we talk about Google and Facebook and these companies, we kind of just assume that because they have the money, they will do their best to protect their data. But we see that's not always true. I mean, they might do their best, but even somewhat recently, we had a breach at the company LinkedIn, which, if you don't know, it's essentially a job. It is where you put your resume and kind of sell yourself online. So they had a breach, and we wouldn't expect them normally to have a breach, but you don't really normally expect a breach in general. So it's these companies are trying their best in terms of cybersecurity. Now, when it comes to the idea of privacy, it really depends on the user. I personally don't have Instagram, Facebook, these kinds of social medias, and I think that's more of a personal choice. I don't necessarily find the need for these things, but some people do, and it's kind of up to the people who do to look into what these companies are,
to keep them in check.
To kind of make sure that the companies aren't asking too much of them, or if they are, what they're actually giving to these companies. And there are a lot of companies that provide clear privacy policies. It's just that no one bothers to necessarily read the privacy policies to figure out what it says on there. So I do think, especially recently with the GDPR, making a lot of websites, forcing a lot of websites to give you access to some of the data that they have on you. We see a lot of social media platforms allow you to do some form of export of your data. And I do think it's important for people who are participating in social media, or who are having accounts on these large companies to check in and see what these companies know about them, because it's kind of up to them what they want to put out about themselves.
Now, here's this one point that a lot of people have raised up. It is hard to function in nowadays society without the presence of social media. You know what I'm saying? It's not completely up to our preference or not to use these kind of things or not. Because if you're not using it, you're just really hard to function in daily life. So, do you think there will be an alternative to these, mainstream Instagram, Facebook, Google Chat or messengers? Do you think there's alternative, or what we could do to best protect ourselves?
Well, there's definitely kind of a threshold, because as you said, a lot of people, kind of require these social medias to function in day-to-day life, whether it's communicating with their friends or coworkers, or just kind of, staying in the know of what's going on within their social circles. It's definitely a hard ecosystem to get out of, but I do think it's not completely necessary. I would still say I function in day-to-day life just fine without social media, but I still need some way to function, right? So if I want to talk to someone, I'm going to have them install one of the many end-to-end encrypted messengers, or they could just text me. And I think having this rather than having social media, I've noticed certain effects. I'm not constantly scrolling through Instagram or Reddit or Twitter or something. It really does free up a lot of time. And I've never noticed that it's gotten someone to stop like communicating with me entirely. I haven't lost contact with someone because I just decided one day to not be on social media. And I do think that it's important to understand that these personal connections that we have, they don't hold their value within the social media. They continue on without social media, but I would say it is hard to move on.
Definitely. I wouldn't be able to imagine me personally just cut off on social media, and like you just said that you personally did not lose contact with anyone by cutting off your social media. To be honest, I don't have the confidence in that. I really do not. So I think it is really brave for you to like mention this, to put this out there for everyone to discuss about. We probably should, look into social media. Is it really a necessity in our life? Speaking of that, let's have a short history lesson per se. Speaking of like giant corporation, in early 2016, FBI asked Apple to produce a backdoor program to disable the encryption of a terrorist iPhone following the Paris terrorist attack. Apple declined, yet a few weeks later, FBI revealed that they had already hacked the phone without the consent or the cooperation of Apple. According to research, NSA already had the capability to turn on your iPhone's microphone or turn on your laptop's camera without your consent or notice. Now, these are overwhelming power. I think we could all agree to that. Us plebs, like... If NSA really want to look into our stuff, is there anything we can do about it? Like, is there anything that us normal citizen that is not like, nerdy in the field like you are, or like expertise in the field like you are, is it any way for our normal citizens to do something about these overwhelming force such as FBI and NSA?
I do think it is. I don't think it would be very practical to try and hide from something as large as the NSA or the FBI, but at this point it's not really. I mean, we are in a sense, we still have to hold the NSA and FBI in check because we want to make sure that they're doing things that are somewhat reasonable still, but it's not. We've gotten to the point where we can't really hide necessarily from these large 3-letter agencies. It's more of the private companies that we're worried about having our data. And it's interesting that you brought up this case from 2016 where the FBI got into Apple's iPhone, because Apple as a whole is they put out this act of privacy. They're very privacy conscious corporation. But in reality, privacy nowadays has become more of a selling point. It's been brought into the light by things like Snowden or ransomware attacks, or just like different attacks on people's privacy that people have started to notice. So Apple, noticing this, is choosing to sell their devices and their technology as privacy conscious. Now, to do this, they need to have it in the press that they stand up for people's privacy. And I wouldn't say Apple's necessarily trying to go against your privacy. I don't think they have necessarily a bad intent, but I don't think that their act of privacy is kind of I don't think it's very, very truthful in its entirety. I mean, a lot of the cases of Apple turning over information to FBI are from what's called the iCloud, which is, when you connect your phone to your Apple account, it kind of automatically syncs stuff to the iCloud, which is, it's encrypted on the way there, but your iCloud account isn't actually encrypted, so they can just kind of see any of the data that syncs there, and automatically, Apple's syncing your contacts, your calendars, your history, and whatnot. So they kind of already have a lot of access to that data without getting into your phone or laptop. Now, Apple phones, when you turn on the password, they are encrypted. And more recently, Apple's been doing a better job to try and stop people like the FBI or the NSA from getting access to their phones when they're encrypted with a proper password. But in the past, I actually read up a bit on this not too long ago, and I believe how the FBI got into an Apple phone was they basically saved the phone's state, because if you don't know, when you put in too many incorrect passwords on an iPhone, it kind of locks up and it doesn't allow you to keep entering incorrect passwords. But what I believe they did was they saved the state of the iPhone, automatically tried a password using some bot or program, and then they did this enough times. When those didn't work, it locked up, said wait a minute, wait 10 minutes and whatnot. Instead of waiting, they just reset it to where they had saved it from before, and which reset the password lock, and then they just automatically...
They can just keep going to try.
Yeah, they just kept trying it without having to wait each time, which kind of circumvents Apple's, security. So I believe Apple's trying to patch that up, or maybe they already have, but that I believe was how they got into it.
Good to know all these. Now, you mentioned the name.
Mm-hmm.
How convenient of that. You mentioned the name Snowden.
Mm-hmm.
I just want a little bit of information for our listeners, because most people, I would assume most people don't really have like a great understanding of this. Edward Joseph Snowden is a former CIA agent and a contracted worker of NSA. In June 2013, I believe, he leaked crucial and highly classified information, thousands of classified documents of the NSA, revealing problems of mass surveillance conducted by the government. Right now, Joseph Snowden is a warranted criminal. Is that correct? I believe he's prosecuted by our American government.
Yeah, I believe he technically broke the law.
Yeah, so just what do you think of this general situation? What do you think about this character?
It's interesting you bring it up, because not too long ago I was reading his his book that he published, his autobiography, and it's interesting. In the book we get to see a lot of his background and a lot of why he kind of decided to do what he did. And a lot of what he talks about in the beginning of the book is, when he was growing up, the internet was first coming out, and we didn't really have, things like social media or streaming websites. There was a lot of kind of online forums and chat rooms. And the one thing that he does mention quite frequently in the beginning of the book is the idea to be forgotten, in a sense. The idea that you can be whatever you want with, a pseudonym, a username, and that. And then, if you don't like who that username kind of embodies or who it becomes, you would just make a new username, and it would be completely untraceable to you. And he was saying a lot of the fun of the internet back then was trying to get to know people based off of who they are rather than their usernames, because people would go through usernames so frequently that you would see someone you maybe don't recognize, but you'd be like, I think I know that person. And he was talking about how more recently, the name of his book is Permanent Record, I believe, and he talks about throughout the book the idea that the NSA and the FBI and the CIA and all these three-letter agencies and governments and companies and all that are sort of changing that, in the sense that we no longer have this temporal ecosystem where you might one day be something and then the next day you forget about it and you can move on, because there's kind of this continuous permanent record of what you've done on social media and what you've done just in general online. And when he revealed all these documents, what he was wanting to do was to kind of show he had concerns about the government not necessarily being constitutional, and sort of he felt that it was his duty as an American to inform the citizens, to give citizens more power to understand what he felt was unconstitutional abuse of government power, because the citizens can't really do much in a democracy if they don't necessarily even know that there's something to do or that anything's going wrong. So I believe in his mind he felt the need to kind of inform the citizens, and it was interesting because he was thinking about the best way to do that. You could go to someone like WikiLeaks or something like that and kind of just release the documents willy-nilly, just kind of give the public the ability to peruse it. But he didn't necessarily want all of the government's secrets to be leaked. He did believe there were still things that should be kept confidential, and he believed also that he would lose some sort of authenticity if it were just published like willy-nilly. So he decided to give this information to credible journalists who would then decide what does the public need to know, what's important for the public to understand, and they kind of redacted a lot of this unnecessary information that might have put the government at risk, like government secrets that aren't necessarily affecting the public as much.
It's interesting that you mentioned government secret.
Mm-hmm.
Now, WikiLeaks, as you just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
WikiLeaks creator Julian Assange,
Mm-hmm.
of which was an extremely controversial character,
Mm-hmm.
and just WikiLeaks as a whole is a
Mhm.
controversial organization. Some said that it's reckless when it comes to the way that they release secret documents.
Mm-hmm.
Julian Assange was arrested at April 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe was deported back to Britain or America. I'm not really sure.
Mhm.
Don't quote me on that. But here's the thing. Both Julian Assange and Edward Joseph Snowden
Mm-hmm.
had leaked the secret and basically private, well, not exactly private because the government is an institution, but institutional secret was leaked
Mhm.
by these two. What do you think will be like the fundamental difference between
Mhm.
the institutional security and the private security of us? And
Mm-hmm.
if there is any difference in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
how should we treat such difference?
Well, I personally think that everyone should be held accountable when it comes to the way they act and the way they go about things. However, the government is when it has so much control and so much power over such a large group of people, we like to live in a democracy where people have this power over the government, or we have some control or some say over what the government does. And we have things like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and that kind of provide us these ways of kind of having some say in what the government does. But it's times like these when we realize that they're not always concerned about what it is they're set up to do. They're more concerned about what it is they're doing now and like how they can protect themselves in the future. And I think it's important because you noted that a lot of people were calling WikiLeaks kind of reckless in the way it publishes documents, and I do think because like I was saying, when Snowden released his documents, he decided specifically not to do it on WikiLeaks because he didn't want he didn't want all the government secrets to be just released willy-nilly. He wanted specific secrets to be released so that he could tell this narrative of government surveillance and how bad it's done without kind of having innocent or not so innocent side effects. WikiLeaks, I think, is an interesting website. I don't know too much about it personally, but from what I hear, it kind of just publicizes documents or classified or otherwise non-public materials in this kind of ideology that people should just have access to the information, all the information, unredacted information.
Yeah, on that hand, let me just interrupt you real quick. That I want to remind the audience that WikiLeaks is also the one that's responsible for Hillary Clinton's email leak in 2016 election, which a lot of people blame that for the election loss for the Democrats. A lot of people think that Hillary Clinton lost majorly on her record, which is, thanks to WikiLeaks, was leaked to everyone, leaked to the public. Yeah, continue with your...
Yeah. So I was saying the idea behind WikiLeaks, I believe, is that people should have all the information and then be able themselves to judge based off of that, to judge whatever it is the information was released from. Now, I personally I don't find this to be entirely correct, because if you think about it from a corporation's standpoint, you might have something released, and then all of these people or customers or individuals are now looking at you with a very fine tooth comb, as it were. Whereas we can't really imagine that being okay on an individual basis. If someone had all their personal information released, like complete records of everything that they've done, we might be able to judge them in a sense, but I think everyone has at least something that they like to keep private, they like to keep personal. And I can't imagine a world where everyone knew everything about everyone. I can't imagine.
That would be quite horrifying.
Yeah, I can't imagine it to be good.
Yeah. And I guess that's also like a really good point when it comes to that organization of these, that most people in like the field of security and such always held this organization in such high regards because they leak like government information and such. It's really refreshing to hear like a nuanced take on these whole things. Now, there's like the last few more points I want to address. First of all, you had talked a lot about during this podcast. You had talked a lot about security being leaked by either giant corporations or the government. You do know that there will be people calling you a conspirator, a conspiracy theorist. They will lump you with the bunch of people that think 9/11 is made by the government. They will lump you with those people.
I could see that happening.
Yeah, so there are still ignorant public, like not say ignorant, unknowing public that treats these matters as like a treacherous behavior against the country. What do you think of that? Like, what do you think they could convince these people to fight for their own rights?
Well, I think it's coming more into the light, especially with like I said, the Earn It Act, which might stop us from being able to use end-to-end encryption, which is essential in a lot of privacy-oriented technologies. But it's also coming more into the light with things like Clearview. For those of you who don't know, it's essentially a company that scrapes or downloads and looks through your online persona and all your pictures that include your face, maybe your friends' faces, and it tries to link these pictures of you to a name. And then once it does, it puts you in this database, which now anyone can pay to kind of look through, and based off of any picture they have of you, find out who you are. And I can imagine as more and more things like this become clear, because let's pretend this company is new. the idea has been there for as long as the internet was born. People have always collected other people's information. It just might not have been as public. So let's pretend that this is the newest the only thing that's doing that. If it were, then that would mean that it has caused so much disruption within the at least the privacy community. I'm not so sure how many people know of it outside of that. It has caused so much disruption that they actually were breached, probably by someone interested in privacy.
Oh, damn.
And their list of all their customers who've purchased their services, their identification services, was exposed. I'm not sure where it was, but we find these big corporations like Walmart or I'm not certain about this, but I want to say, actually maybe I won't say anything. I want to be certain about this, but I know for a fact that Walmart was using facial AI to basically recognize your face, and they were using Clearview to do that.
That is genuinely horrifying.
Now, as we can reasonably assume, they're not the only company that's doing this. They're just one of the ones that was more well known, and because of that gotten leaked. But it makes you think about like these things that we think are so they sound like they're out of a sci-fi movie, but in reality these technologies have been around for a while, and we just don't really think about them.
That is really good to know that now Walmart
you can't walk into a Walmart without your face being recognized.
They have facial recognition in Walmart. That is horrifying. I would not buy oatmeal in that place ever again. Well, okay, let's go back like the original point of this podcast. Let's just, with all these context and content you have put out, first and foremost, you are an artist. You're ransomware, Mr. Somewhere. It is like truly inspiring to see you could be incorporated these kind of information that is at most point kind of ecocentric in a way. Like it's really hard for like not ecocentric. Forgive me, esoteric. It's like it's really hard for people that's outside the circle to know all these. So it's really refreshing to see you to be able to incorporate all this information into like art, into an art piece. Do you have like something to share? Do you have like tutorial per se for the young artists out there, for like people that inspire to make work, to incorporate? Like, don't just, because nowadays I see in artistry or like creativity, creator side, musicians, filmists, they are kind of like just trapped in like a circle. Musicians are just making music. Music. They don't really talk about really like other stuff that is like kind of unrelated. Like before you, I was thinking this cybersecurity have nothing to do with like rap scenes on SoundCloud. And so, do you have like a teaching or like something that you can tell the young artists out there to like?
I will say that when I first started becoming interested in cybersecurity and privacy and all that, I would have never thought that I was going to make a rap song about that, much less even a creative piece about that. But everyone has kind of their own interests, their own special field that they could rant on for hours and hours about. If you talk to anyone, there's probably something that they're going to be interested in, that's going to entertain them. And I believe that everyone has a creative outlet somehow. It doesn't have to necessarily be music. It could be drawing. It could be painting. It could be photography. It could be creating. Writing. Video editing. It's just any sort of creative outlet. And as long as you're interested and you're using the creative outlet to kind of express what you're interested about, or at least try something new. Then I always think it's good to see people engaging with their interests in a creative outlet.
That is good to hear. Finally, just before we wrap everything up, do you have like anything that you want to plug? Like, do you have anything you want to say before just wrap up everything cleanly?
I'm gonna go back to my cabin in the woods that is not connected to internet and is in a unknown country in an unknown location buried deep underground.
That's your final message.
That's my final message.
You don't have anything to plug.
New album coming soon, possibly.
And that's good to hear, everyone. Please anticipate Ransomware's newest album. Now, again, as Ransomware, Mr. Somewhere had requested that he will remain completely anonymous on both all his information and none of them will be disclosed in any sort of way. So I just want to put it out there as a disclaimer. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ransomware, for joining our podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to hear so much about just security and privacy. I never thought of any of those before. It is great to hear artists, especially.
It's good to get the message out.
Thank you, and thanks for the listener for listening to today's podcast. I'll see you around.